thanks for joining us. This is your host, Addis Asafa. You're watching OBN Horn of Africa. This is Talk to OBN show. Today we're going to talk about the upcoming Ethiopian election, which is going to be the 6th national election, which is going to be held on the June 5, 2021. Of course, Ethiopia was supposed to hold an election on past August. Due to COVID, it was postponed to the upcoming June. I joined by Soliana Shimalis, communication head of Ethiopian Electoral Board. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Great. Would you exactly tell me about your preparation so as to have the upcoming election transparent?
We have made so many progresses by now, so it will be very difficult, to mention every preparation that we have done. But basically to mention about what we have been doing in the last couple of months, starting from actually the last 2 years where we started preparation for this national election before our calendar was suspended by the COVID pandemic. So basically we have changed the electoral law. That means the organizational establishment law of the National Election Board itself was changed as part of the reform initiative. And then after that we had another law which includes political parties registration, election execution, and code of conduct of political parties, which was also enacted for the purpose of this election in the coming elections. So there has been a legal revision, and based on that we have prepared around 39 directives. These directives specifically govern the process of party registration and election execution. So in legal side we have been doing that. So the board was re-established by itself 2 years ago, and we do have a new board members, 5 board members from different backgrounds, which we believe are very independent and impartial. And after that we also tried to reform and build the capacity of the institution, which is going to be, which we're trying to do is to make it capable of conducting an election, especially in an independent manner. Previously, we do have this challenge of having so many capacity gaps, so that makes the National Election Board so much dependent on the government / party structure. So that means it needs a huge reform regarding building the capacity of staff, having new human resources that will work on the coming national elections. So in that regard, we have been preparing through that. Regarding when it comes to the national election, obviously one of the first things that we did is putting out a timetable, which specifically shows what kind of major activities that the National Election Board is going to conduct in run-up to the voting day, the specific E-Day. And then we put out that timeline, and obviously, as you remember, due to COVID, we couldn't conduct the election as we planned it on last year, August. So after the pandemic and all the conversation at the House of People Representatives and the recommendation by the Ministry of Health, now we're back and conducting the national election, and we have come with another timetable which shows the major activities, as I said, and major tasks that the NEBE is going to conduct. And so now we're going to conduct the election on June, and basically we have prepared our logistical preparations. That means we purchased all the materials and the equipment that are needed for our polling stations and also constituency offices. We have finalized all that. And we have started distribution of materials, obviously, for our constituency offices. And then now we do have 673 constituency offices, which specifically have equipments based on the constituencies of the national, the federal parliament and regional seats. And so we do have offices out there, and then we registered candidates. So we conducted a candidate registration at constituency office level, not at NEBE's headquarters or regional offices, but at constituency offices levels.
Okay, the Electoral Board has requested 4 billion Ethiopian birr in the very first place. Later, it reduced to 3.7 billion birr, as the discussion made with that of the Budget and Finance of Standing Committee of House of People Representative, right? Why you reduced to that?
We did not reduce. We asked 4 billion, and then the House said we need to minimize some of our costs because it's very expensive. It's like tenfold more than the previous election. So, and then we do have a capacity issue. We run the election based on mostly for government's capacity and government state money. Therefore, one of the comments that was given from the government was like, yeah, that's a lot of money. Please try to minimize some of the costs so that we can be able to accommodate all the requests from the National Election Board. So in our case, like from 4 billion, 3.7 billion, it's not that a difference.
Out of this total 3.7 million birr, 900 million birr is generated from development partners,
Yes.
right? Who are those development partners?
So basically, the major ones are three. The one is the United Nations Development Program. So basically, the United Nations Development Program mobilizes funds from different countries, and then it manages it, and it has its own UN money, but also it has like money from different countries who want to support this election. So it's kind of a pool, but which is administered by the UNDP. Some money from the UN itself, but some other monies from different countries who wanted to donate or to want to give money for this election. The other one is obviously the USAID one. The USAID one through the International Foundation for Electoral Systems, and that's partially for the election management body, which is the NEBE by itself, or partially it goes to civil society organizations and other initiatives related with election. And the third one is the European Union. The European Union through the election support project, they also have some amount of money which we mobilized. And they also support some of the activities that the Navy is doing, but also they also support civil society.
So how do you do the allocation of this budget for each? I mean, it's a process. Like you're working on it, right?
No. We don't allocate; they allocate.
I mean, it's a process. Like
they allocate.
You're working on it, right?
No. So they allocate. For example,
allocate?
UNDP itself. For example, UNDP itself will mobilize money from different countries.
What I mean is.
It do have a specific activities. It do have a
million, right?
No, we didn't. We are generating 900,000 from the funding partners. The other one is obviously from the Ethiopian government.
From the Ethiopian government, but the aggregate is supposed to be 3.7, right?
And we do ask it for 1 billion for COVID now, so it's more than that, anyways.
Okay. Anyway, at the end of the day, you are going to allocate it for expense, right? It goes to the other parties. And the leading party, whatever.
No, it doesn't go to parties. So how it goes is like, obviously there are electoral activities. There is a huge operational plan. We call operational plan, which shows the operation that we do. And then it has its own budget for this specific operation. So we say like, for example, for those monies that the government covers, we don't cover it from funding partners, but like for those remaining monies that we don't get coverage from the funding partners, like we will from the government will allocate to funding partners, and some of the money allocation needs to be specifically from government because it has issues of accountability. For example, we only pay for poll workers from Ethiopian government money. We cannot pay poll workers from donors' money. The other thing, for example, if you support, for example, political parties, we support political parties from the Ethiopian government money because that's the government institution's responsibility. Let me finish the other one. So the other funding partners, they do have their own proposals when they bring the money. That's specifically maybe that's for procurement or some other activities for trainings and so on. So we decide based on our demand and based on our deficit from the government budget, we allocate those monies from there.
Are you freely operating this task? You know what I mean? Are you free from the incumbent leadership now?
Well, that's not a good question because obviously, you mean, are you operating this election and the institution impartially, right? So I think we need to discuss what impartiality is. So basically impartiality, like it's not a feeling, right? It's not like, oh, NEBE is independent and impartial, or NEBE is dependent or impartial. It just doesn't, it just cannot base on emotions. It basically should base on reasons. It should base on like, documents, evidences which shows like the impartiality or the partiality of the institution. That being said, how do you evaluate the impartiality of one institution? So basically you evaluate it through its decision making, you evaluate it through its transparency, you evaluate it through its actual day-to-day activities, which are going to be very public, obviously, because like election is a very, very public activity.
Okay, who evaluates and monitor works undertaken by
You.
the public? The public?
The media, any other institution who asks the impartiality of us. So in our opinion, We believe that the Navy is impartial not because we work for it or because we are the employees and we're running the show, but because our decision makings are based on law, based on the rule of law, the law that we have, and our decision makings are basically transparent. We participate everybody, political parties, stakeholders, government itself through the process, and we never had any decision making that was contested in saying like, oh, this shows partiality to this party or partiality to the other party, and then we are able to defend if there are some impressions like that.
You know what I'm saying, Soliana? Look, you've said the public, are, monitor and evaluate our tasks. You've said that, but technically, there is, a working procedure. For instance, the National Electoral Board reports its performance to the House of People Representative, right?
Yeah.
Okay, that was my question.
Well, it reports to the House of People Representative, but the previous board also reported to the House of People Representative. It doesn't tell any independency. The working procedure doesn't tell any independency. Like the Navy has this baggage for many years that it has been blamed for being not credible, for not being impartial. But the structure was the same. It was reporting to the House of People Representative, but I don't think the structure itself will give a meaningful definition of impartiality. It might contribute to it. Let me finish. It might contribute to it for the impartiality because structure is one of the important things, but it doesn't really define what the institution impartiality is. I think the institution impartiality, let me finish, should be defined based on its activity, based on the rule of law that it uses, how it follows the legal procedures, how it gives a decision, how that decision making is being communicated, and how that process is transparent. And then through all these criteria, we believe that Navy is definitely an impartial institution which is trying its best to change the previous course where the institution had a baggage on impartiality and credibility.
So shall we wait a transparent and genuine execution in the upcoming election?
It's already transparent. The institution is already transparent. We put out a lot of information. We're open, we're accessible. Our decision making is always supported with our statements and public announcements. We base our decisions on the law, starting from the Constitution up to the laws that we have, the electoral laws that we are our hand. So basically our track record so far shows that we are conducting this process very impartially and transparently, and we hope to do that until the end of the election period.
During the last regime, the previous party used to bargain and intervene in the electoral board's activities. And that was my doubt, and that's why I asked you, shall we wait a transparent and genuine execution?
Honestly speaking, even a transparent and genuine execution is a very complicated concept. For example, in this election, we do have 50,000 polling stations. On those 50,000 polling stations, we are going to have more than 150,000 poll workers. So what you can do to ensure this impartiality is you train them, you give them the specific code of conduct, how they should enact this process. You make sure that they are being recruited based on your own criteria, not with the influence of the ruling party or, for that matter, any other opposition party, because impartiality and independency doesn't always come from the government or from the party that runs the government. In these cases, it comes from the opposition, it comes from activists, it comes from different political actors who really wanted to influence the process. So what you can do is you have your own criteria, you have your own process, which checks that these interventions doesn't happen. And then after that, you'll support it with transparency. And then I cannot give you a guarantee saying 150,000 poll workers are going to be impartial and they're going to conduct it perfectly. I cannot tell you that. But I can say if there is a problem, I will be transparent, I will be open to it, I will make corrections, and I will announce that these problems have happened and then we're going to correct them through this. So I don't think transparency, for example, for activities like election, which is vast, which is going to be involving many actors, is going to be fully independent, partially free and fair. The previous board has been saying that, and we know what the results has been. So what we can say is, as a new Navy, what we can say is we place procedures, we use laws, we correct, we're transparent, we're accountable, we make measures.
Okay, are there places or provinces which are not going to partake in this election due to different reasons?
Not really. So far, no. But there has been conversations. We know in public there are some security issues in different parts of the country which might make electoral activities very difficult to conduct. But the first round of activity that we have, the candidates registration, we opened all the offices, 673 in all parts of the country, except for Tigray. No. Tigray, we're not running an election in Tigray due to the law enforcement operation that's going on. So we're running the election not in Tigray, like in other parts of the country. So in those other parts of the country, in other regions, that means like 10 of them, including the 2 administration cities, we opened all the constituency offices. We had some issues regarding the places where there had been security problems. Our office opening was a bit delayed. Our transportation was a bit delayed because like it needs additional precaution and collaboration with law enforcement. But we were able to open all 674 constituency offices in all over the country. So that means in our first phase, we didn't face a place where we're not going to conduct elections. But now there's another phase. Obviously, constituency offices are more larger, but when you go to polling stations, they're going to be very close and in different neighborhoods. So that means like it needs more security, more preparations and so on. So we're working on that, and we don't know yet exactly if there are any places that we're not going to conduct an election due to security issues, except for the one that we recently announced, the 30 polling stations that we're not going to open between Afar and Somali regions.
Great. You have highlighted it a while ago. Would you exactly tell me how many polling stations are expected to be ushered?
50,000, 50.
Okay, you have identified all these polling.
Oh yeah, I mean they were obviously there. Like it's not us. Like on the previous election, for example, before 6 years, there has been 46,000 polling stations, and on the previous one there has been 30 plus thousand polling stations. So that means the polling stations that NEBI uses, starting from the first election up to now, are obviously similar places and similar spots. Only the number increases based on the increase of the population and then through time.
What about the Somali regional state? I have read the news yesterday. There is a kind of complaint from the government, the regional government.
Yeah, I mean there has been a kind of a complaint from both Afar and Somali regional governments because they do have this contested neighborhood Qabalis, which they claim to be there on the part of their region from the Somali side and the part of their region from the Afar side. So basically, what we have said is like we're not going to conduct elections on those Qabalis. So that would mean like when NEBI doesn't conduct elections, those contested Qabalis, those who are on the side of Somalia will go to their nearby Qabali and vote there. On those on the side of Afar region, they will go to their nearby Qabali and vote there. So what we did was like due to security concerns, because there has been conflicts in the place, frequently we didn't want to be part of a conflict or a process that will aggravate any conflict that's already happening. So election is about peace, election is about public participation. So we don't want to make the election a reason for any conflict between 2 regional states or communities. So what we said is like, okay, we're not going to conduct anything out there, but we'll respect the right of people to vote and to be voted. Therefore, their constituency is going to be the same. So they're going to vote 2 different constituencies, but that region, we're not going to be the reason for any disturbances or like violent activities around.
Okay, the National Electoral Board is working, down to dusk to make the upcoming election. To make the upcoming election transparent. You say, right? Okay, what are the bottlenecks that you are facing while you are rushing to execute the upcoming election?
I think we don't have that problem with transparency, but obviously we do have a very huge capacity gap from our side because, as I told you earlier, this is the first time where the NEBI tried to conduct the election fully by itself without depending much on the ruling party structure or the ruling party support. So that means it's basically starting from the scratch, that like the recruitment of poll workers, previously it has been done obviously by the ruling party, and then the ruling party sends its people, and then it was easier for the NEBI to conduct elections because there's already a structure, a parallel structure, party structure. But now we're trying to make that process independent, so we do have a huge capacity gap from our side. And obviously the other challenge we have is like the institution has been very, very, very low in its capacity, in its executive capacity, even below average of any average government institution. So that's what we found. when we joined the election board. There has always been complaints on government institutions' efficiency and capacity, but the Nebe case is like really unique. Like it's even below the average capacity problem of any government institution. So on this side, we're trying our best to build the capacity of the organization and to make it independently run an election. And on this side, we need to run an election anyway because the time was really demanding and there are legal requirements that we need to meet. So balancing the two, running an election and building an institution, has been very challenging to us. And when it gets to, like, this is the bigger one, but like when it gets to operations, like we do have challenges of transportation, we do have challenges of like getting the logistics move around. Obviously, Ethiopia is has limited resources regarding logistics, operations, transportation, and so on. And in projects like election, which almost covers everything in the country, it gets more difficult. I think election is the only huge project that addresses every place in the country. Maybe which another activity which is closer is obviously the census and maybe national elections, but national elections, they only mobilize 150,000 people. They're very small. And the census, they are happening in everybody's house, so they do also have a room to work on around that. But like for us, this is like a huge operation, and the Navy is, as I told you earlier, has capacity problems, and then it has its own reforms that it's conducting to fill that, but at the same time, it do have a time challenge because we need to make the election around here. So we're balancing that, like the time challenge and then like the capacity problem, and then the things that we started for the first time that hasn't been there before. So it's a very complicated logistical, operational, organizational capacity, and also political problems, but we're trying our best.
Okay, apart the registered parties, they are individual contestants?
No, not really.
Okay, the laws and the procedures are the same while you apply for...
No, not really.
With that of the parties?
No, not really. For political parties, that you need to be a member of a political party, and the political party should make you a candidate, and that's it. So for that specific area, and then you need to prove that like you're from that area and your residency and your identity and so on. For individual candidates, they need to bring signatures saying like I'm running for office this one constituency, and they need to bring 2,500 signatures for the seat that they're running for. And obviously the legal requirements of the ID, like domicile, living for the area for 1 year, and then getting a residence ID card or identity ID card are the same, but like for the parties, they're not expected to bring signatures because they're already organized and licensed political parties. For individuals, they need to bring 2,500 signatures from their constituency, and then they can register after that. So there is a big difference between them.
Okay, I'm going to ask you your opinion. Like, you're not supposed to speak on your personal opinion, whatever. Like, good. Is the upcoming election a threat or a hope for Ethiopia? Yeah.
No, that's a very simplistic question.
Whatever. Go. Yeah.
No, that's a very simplistic question.
Whatever.
I think it's going to be both. So this is not Nebe's opinion, definitely. This is going to be my personal opinion. I think it's going to be an opportunity to try many things. It's going to be an opportunity to actually, more than the election, the fact that we tried to build some institution that's relatively improving its credibility and relatively improving its independency. That's a big hope for Ethiopia, and I hope like this is going to be a very good foundation for the coming election and coming institutions. So from that side, it's a hope. And obviously from the trade side, Ethiopia is a very complicated country, and then the politics is very complicated and it's very dynamic. It changes a lot. So if you ask me, like when I joined Nebe 2 years ago, like things were not this complicated. And like there hadn't been like this level of trade hasn't been this level discussion. For example, people wouldn't say like they will have hope and like more of a hope, but like when things go on, like people think about trade, about security, about like different problems the country is facing. So obviously the election cannot run out of that context and by itself in a very utopian way. So I guess we need to admit that like the political environment and the national environment that we're operating in is complicated. So it will definitely affect the election positively or negatively. So we need to work through that. So in that case, Ethiopia's threat is a threat for Nebe. Ethiopia's problem is obviously a problem for Nebe and the coming election, but Ethiopia's hope is also a hope for Nebe, and Nebe's work and institutional foundation is a good hope for Ethiopia as well.
What has to be done to have a fair and free election from the public side? I mean, what is expected from the general public so as to have a fair and free election?
Two things, obviously. One, participation. It's always important to participate. Like when we leave the space by not participating, some other people obviously use it. So it's always important to participate and not to leave the space, the political space, the voting space, the electoral space. And if you leave it, somebody else who doesn't really understand our concern, who doesn't really support our concern, will use it. So participation is very important. When we leave the space, somebody else will use it. So participate. Like it might be voter registration, it might be getting aware of what's going on and then learning about the electoral process. It's also important to learn the electoral process because previously elections has been very disregarded activities in Ethiopia. And many of us, including myself, before joining NEBE, like we don't know the details, the technicalities, the legality, and so on, because we just give up like the hope of like having a very better election. So now I think we do have an opportunity, so we need to learn more about the electoral process. We need to participate. That's the first one. And the second one is, I think, obviously, from the larger public, it's very, very important we participate peacefully. Election is one incident. It comes and it goes. And then people's relationship, our relationship with our country, our relationship with our community, our relationship with each other will maintain. It has been there and it will maintain in the future as well. Therefore, it's very important to consider those things when you get into electoral competition, ideological competition, and political competition. I think we do have that in mind, and if we participate, there's going to be a very fruitful outcome for the election.
Is the National Electoral Board ready to usher this election in terms of like logistics and manpower?
Trying its best. It hasn't been perfect so far. We do have so many challenges, as I told you earlier, because logistics is in general a problem for the country, and there is a capacity issue in Ethiopia regarding logistics, transportation, infrastructure. There are places where we needed to use a boat to transport materials. There are places where we needed to use like horses and other animals to transport materials. So we ourselves also learned like what kind of country do we have, what kind of infrastructure do we have, what kind of capacity do we have as a Navy and as a country as well. So logistics in operation has been a challenge, definitely. We're trying our best, and we learned a lot from this process. We learned a lot from candidates registration, and we are taking that lesson to voter registration, and we're going to take that lesson to election day as well. It hasn't been perfect, but like we're trying our best, and we're asking many collaborations from different government institutions, agencies that are going to be very helpful for us. So yeah, we're trying our best, but it do have many challenges, starting from transportation, infrastructure, understanding of electoral process, poll workers recruitment. But we're trying our best, and at least we don't have a problem with intentions and conducting activities as hardworking as possible. But other challenges remain to be challenges of Ethiopia as well.
Some political parties are reluctant to take part in this election, and they have refrained to take part in the election again. What is their reason?
I don't know. I think that question should be raised for the political parties. No, not really. I think if one political party says they're not going to be able to take part on the election.
While they say this, they just mention a reason, isn't it?
I don't know. You tell me.
Okay. You got to tell me.
No, you got to tell me. If you're asking political parties why political parties are not taking their part in the election, I think political parties should be the one asked. But from our side, I am.
So,
and again, I mean, I don't think it's appropriate to ask the election. No. Let me finish this. I don't think it's very appropriate to ask the election management body why this political party is not taking part on the election. I think that question should be raised to the political party. From our side, we tried our best to be inclusive all the process. We have been trying to solve problems for all political parties. We have been very transparent, as I said earlier, with political parties. We give them poll workers list. We ask them to give us comments on different issues. And then when they raise complaints, we try to be a bridge between the government and political parties to solve the problems as well. We had like our own tripartite conversations with parties, ruling party, and ourselves to solve problems into different regions. And we have been successful in some of them. We hadn't been successful in other of them. So I think in general, I don't think their participation to the election has a very direct relationship with NEBE. I think it has so many other components and so many other reasons which the political parties themselves should respond. As NEBE, we would have been very happy if all 48 of them or 49 of them took part in the election, and then we would have been very happy to serve every one of them as an impartial and equal manner. So it's in general very unfortunate that there are parties who are not taking part in this election, but the more complicated answer for the why not taking part in the election should be raised to the political parties, not the election board, unless you do have a very specific one to ask.
You're a communication head of the NEB, isn't it?
I am.
So, look, you got to skip it because you're reluctant to tell me the reason. Because look, in principle, look, when someone, or let's say a party, we're talking about parties, we are not, if they just say, we are not going to take part in the upcoming election due to this reason, wouldn't they? Didn't?
They did. Yeah,
sure.
They did.
So you wouldn't like to mention it?
No, why would I mention it? I'm not the party.
Whatever. Okay.
I'm not
Okay. Okay. Good. Cool. Okay. I'm from the total 3.7 million billion. I mean, I guess it's a very huge money, huge amount of money. What are the major expense areas?
So there are different phases. So phase one is going to be candidate registration, which we are going to register candidates, which stayed almost like for 26 days. So there is a phase before that you need to give them a training, and then there is like 26 days of like registering candidates, and then there are some other dates, additional dates where they finalize their candidate registration work, and then there is another phase which is going to be voters registration, which is going to take 30 days minimum, and obviously 30 up to 45 days where the voters get registered. So that's going to be the second phase. And then there's going to be another phase which is like training for polling day, and it's going to be polling day. And this is going to be 150,000 people. Yeah, so the major, so it's going to be a daily rate which we're going to pay for this like thousands of people. So the huge amount of chunk of money goes to poll workers payment. Previously, the poll workers used to be paid a very small amount of money because they're usually workers of the lower structure of the government, like Qabale and so on. So basically, they run the election as an additional job for their main job. So their payment was like really, really small. And then I think the assumption is like they're gonna get another reward by working for that afterwards by working on the lower structures. But now we don't want to create any merger with the lower structure and workers like who gets money from the government at the same time working for the election. So we independently have our own budget. We're going to pay for workers by ourselves, and that's going to be a daily rate for them. So the huge chunk of money goes to the poll workers payment, and the other chunk of money goes to actually printing of ballot papers, which is going to be 50,000 ballot papers that we are going to print. So it's going to be very huge participation. So the ballot paper printing is going to be the second chunk. And the other chunk is going to be like transportation of materials to 50,000 places into different parts of the country, and the procurement of some materials. But the other procurements, well, we supported that through the partners' money. But once they're procured, like the remaining procurement, we do it by ourselves. And then after that, the transportation is going to be the logistical one. It's going to be the huge one.
Do you have any technology that you're going to use to make your election or your execution accurate?
A small one. So we didn't introduce huge technologies because it's going to be very, by itself it needs another capacity, you know. If you use like technology, for example, at polling station level, that means you need to train 150,000 people on technology, which is going to be complicated, right? So we didn't want to do that. But like for example, we tried candidate registration through a system. So that means for now, for 673 places, we tried some technology like a computer, server, registering candidates in the computer, and then like printing their candidacy ID out there. So we tried it at constituency level in 673,000 level. We do have 3 up to 5 officers there. So we trained, we recruited IT people. We trained them on candidate registration and the system that they're going to use. So there is a bit of technology to it, but also there is the paperwork that supports the process. In case we do have challenges with technology, we can anytime track back the paperwork and the paper documentation process. So we introduced a little bit of that. And the other that we introduced today is we're trying to register students, university students, online through technology. So that means, because university students obviously has access to technology, or at least a phone or they know how the internet works. So we wanted to try that with the university students, that they can register online to be a voter, and then at the end they will get like their temporary certification of registration online, and then afterwards when they go to like polling station on the voting day, we're gonna do more verification. So yeah, we have some technologies, but like it's a very limited one as much as possible. But like hopefully, if you're gonna have like better time, better capacity in the future, we can even do the biometric voters registration.
Once again, thank you for joining us. This brings you the end of our edition for today. Have a wonderful time. Of course, you have a wonderful insight about the upcoming election. Bye-bye. Enjoy the rest of our program.